we need to make sure that menopause is regularly visible, constantly banging that drum, not necessarily huge scale events all the time, but in communications, events, training. But it just ensures that employees are aware of the support when they need it most.
Hello, I'm Kathy Abernethy, your host of Pep Talks Health Matters at Work. In this podcast, we get right to the heart of workplace wellness, shedding light on the real issues that people like you and I face every day. From talking about issues like menopause, polycystic ovary syndrome, erectile dysfunction, these are workplace issues, and we share tools, tips and tricks to top employers, and we're here to help you overcome health hurdles at work. So whether you're a people leader, a CEO, or someone looking for answers about their health, come and join me today, and we're not shying away from any awkward, embarrassing conversations. This is Pep Talks, where we know that health really does matter at work. And today, in the lead up to World Menopause Day, we're talking all about menopause in the workplace. Once upon a time, this conversation would have been relegated to hushed tones in bathrooms. But now it's become a boardroom topic. It's a conversation for everybody. This episode is made for HR professionals, employers, and anyone navigating menopause in the workplace, as we bring menopause out of the shadows and into the spotlight this World Menopause Day. My guest today is a peppy client who's made strides in supporting those going through the menopause at work, and it's my pleasure today to welcome you, Lauren Lunniss, Health and Wellbeing Manager at BNP Paribas. Lauren, maybe you could start by just introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about how you came to play your part at BNP Paribas.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm so excited to be joining you today for Pep Talks, and hi to all the listeners. I am Lauren Lunniss. I'm the Health and Wellbeing Manager at BNP Paribas CIB, and my role enables me to look at a variety of data sources to monitor our workforce and advise on whether or not the necessary benefits, services and support are in place to address primary health risks or concerns that our employees may face. Back in 2018, our conversations really ramped up on how we can best support wellbeing topic of menopause in the workplace. And I've been excited by how well this has been received, not only by BNP Paribas, but also other organisations.
Yes, I've been at a couple of your events, and they're well attended, they're well supported, and they're obviously well appreciated as well. Lauren, let's take a moment to just think about some common myths around menopause. This is our Mythbusters section today, and particularly myths around menopause at work. And some of these misconceptions can lead to misunderstandings, and sometimes, if we're not careful, even discrimination. So let's put the record straight and talk about some of these myths. I suppose the first one which comes to mind is when people say, oh, it's just a women's issue and it's too personal for work. How do we address that misconception?
Menopause, it's been a hot topic, let's face it, when it comes to health and wellbeing, not only in the workplace, but we've seen it within the media too, thanks to some high-profile celebrities. And it's honestly no surprise when you look at statistics such as 8 in 10 menopausal women are in work. So perimenopausal and menopausal women represent a sizable segment of the working population. And we are also more aware of the clear links between symptoms affecting things like well-being, workplace culture, and productivity. Therefore, by informing men and women on how best to help themselves, their co-workers, or even their own spouses, creates a welcoming and open environment. And just before I finish this question, it's important to mention that our conversation today is inclusive of trans and non-binary people as well.
Yes, we tend to use the word women, but we include people of all genders in that conversation. Lauren, some may say that menopause symptoms like hot flushes, for example, are embarrassing, but actually, do they affect your work? Some people may say not. How would you respond to that?
Menopause symptoms are complex and include emotional and cognitive changes. We are aware that every person has a unique journey, and symptoms such as concentration, memory, and job-related skills could be impacted. And it's because of this, it's important to be flexible and open when it comes to support and any adjustments in your workplace. So by alleviating anxiety and discomfort, an employee will be able to focus on their tasks. And it could be as simple as providing a small personal desk fan so the employee can cool down more discreetly.
And it's important too to recognise, isn't it, that whilst we can all acknowledge that hot flushes are caused by menopause, there's lots of symptoms which people may not associate with menopause, things like joint pains, brain fog, concentration. And I know from looking at the research that actually when you look at surveys, it's often those more psychological symptoms which have an effect on people at work. Have you had experience of people talking to you about that, things like brain fog, memory loss, concentration?
Absolutely. We have an internal group called the Daisy Chain Network, and we meet very regularly. And especially brain fog, it comes up quite regularly in our conversations. And employees are asking for tips on how to overcome this. Is there anything they can do? So absolutely, it does affect you, and especially if you've got like presentations or anything that you need to prioritize in your work. If you've got brain fog, then there's a chance that you might forget it. And how does that impact you, not only from a work performance point of view, but also for your own anxiety and your own mental well-being. Just finding ways that maybe you could overcome that brain fog by making lists, for instance. That was one of the key bits of feedback, is make yourself a list, tick that list off. Even if you think you're going to remember it, just put it down. That's the best way of doing it.
Yes, I can certainly relate to the reminders app being very important. Our myth number 3 is that companies like BNP Paribas are serious corporate companies. Is it really appropriate that they talk about issues like menopause? What would you say to them?
Well, I think first and foremost, menopause is a natural life stage. There's no denying it, there's no avoiding it, and it's absolutely no secret. So when you look at statistics such as a third of your workforce could be over the age of 50 with the potential to be affected by menopausal symptoms, it is imperative that we create safe spaces for discussion and open dialogue, not only for the individuals experiencing the symptoms, but for those around them, so they can feel more confident and understand how best to support others.
So you're saying really that places like your place of work is actually absolutely the right place to be talking about this conversation.
Absolutely. We know that personal life and work life still go hand in hand. So even if you had a spouse that was going through the menopause, be it you're a male partner or a female partner, if you're able to get this information at work, you could also help support your partner at home, which will essentially make your personal life more comfortable as well. So everything does go hand in hand. So it's good that you communicate this to your business as well as outside partners, mothers, colleagues, friends, etc.
I think that's really interesting, the point that you've highlighted, that it's not just your own colleagues that you're helping, but actually you're spreading conversation and knowledge and education to the people that they're living with at home, and also the people that they're working with and socialising with. I think that's really important. I wonder if you can shed some light for us on how can employers and those who are supporting people at work, colleagues, support those going through the menopause, because it is a personal issue and there are unique challenges. But what can employers do?
Menopause policies are a fantastic way to start. It essentially shows the commitment of the organisation about supporting their employees who are going through journeys such as the menopause. However, it should not be a rigid practice, but rather a guideline. So a policy should be more of a guideline in this respect. As you mentioned, individual requirements must be addressed according to each person's unique menopausal experience and challenges. We need to make sure that menopause is regularly visible, constantly banging that drum, not necessarily huge scale events all the time, but in communications, events, training, meetings, even setting aside a couple of minutes after a meeting to say, oh, by the way, did you know that they're doing a menopause session, menopause cafe? We've got this support in place. This is how you can access the information. But it just ensures that employees are aware of the support when they need it most, because you may have done a fantastic event one year and that was brilliant for those that attended for that year, but it might not be relevant to an employee at that time because they weren't experiencing any menopausal symptoms, so it didn't even cross their mind. So by keeping that regular drum beating, you're able to make sure that that information gets across to everyone when they need it most.
I think that's good advice. Lauren, we're going to come on to some real life stories talking about things that you and I have both heard a lot of times actually around menopause, but you've seen firsthand how the menopause can affect people at work. Do you have some stories that you can share with us that just help us to understand why all this is so important?
I think I actually have two, and they're from two different directions. So the first story, as I mentioned, we have our internal network, the Daisy Chain, and we have regular catch-ups. I ensure that I'm visible, so I always have my camera on or I'm in person, and I also answer any questions based on whatever's been voiced in the conversation. And after one of these menopause cafes, I actually had an employee contact me directly via the internal messenger service. And she mentioned she had been suffering from hot flushes, but she felt too embarrassed to ask the facilities team for a desk fan. I'm talking one of those huge, massive fans, not discreet in the slightest. So after obtaining a desk fan for the employee, I actually organised a meeting with the facilities team to see how we can adapt this procedure and make it easier for employees to cool down should they be suffering with menopausal symptoms or even other medical conditions that could cause your temperature to fluctuate. And since then, we have agreed that the employee could actually purchase one of those small, discreet fans. You've probably seen a lot of people on the underground with them because it's very hot, and they could be charged via USB. They could be left in their lockers, and they basically, no questions asked. They could purchase it themselves and then reimburse it. So it just removes that barrier of having to go and ask the facilities team, maybe feeling too embarrassed to say why they want that fan, and just gives them that little bit of independence again, and so they can feel more comfortable and confident in work. So that was brilliant. That was exciting to see how quickly the business adapted based on the individual coming to me directly and expressing that challenge. And then on the flip side of that, and this is where it is really, really exciting, is that the second story, we organised a panel discussion with the fabulous Lorraine Kelly, and Kathy, you were there as well. And after this session, I had a younger employee approach me, and she expressed that the events and the awareness have really helped her to support her own mother going through the menopause. But it's also better prepared her for when it comes to her menopausal journey, as she wasn't taught about this at school. So essentially, by addressing menopause in the workplace, but generally addressing menopause, we're supporting those that have either gone through or currently going through it, as well as the next generation. And I think that's the most important thing. We are making sure that it becomes easier and more inclusive and fluent in our language to talk about menopause, whereas it was very much taboo, and it's come a long way in such a short space of time already.
I love those stories, Lauren, and in particular the one about the fans, because I can remember when I was sitting in NHS clinics, I'd say to people, why don't you ask your employer for a fan? And they'd say things like, oh, yes, but it will take ages to be requested, and then it's got to be pat tested, and then it's got to come from supplies. And then finally, it could be 3 months before you actually finally get your fan. That's not with BNP Paribas, of course. So that's a really good solution to know that people can just, help themselves really and expense it. Such a simple solution, and yet why does it sometimes take such a lot of effort? I also like the fact that you highlighted there that it's not just, I mean, hot flushes are not just experienced by people with menopause. So actually, by implementing a policy there, you've actually helped people far wider than just those going through menopause. It's a good example. So, Lauren, this is we're going into our rapid fire, our quick fire round. So these are quick answers, if you can. First of all, when it comes to menopause in the workplace, what keeps you up at night, or what keeps up HR managers at work? What are the challenges, do you think?
Oh, I think the top challenge is ensuring that we are supporting and educating managers of people so they have the confidence to support their teams, whilst we're also trying to combat against time restraints and essentially business commitments. So that's the toughest thing. Managers of people have numerous responsibilities, and although they might have all the intentions in the world to help support their team members, they might not have the time. So what can we do to make sure that they have access to the right resources when they need it for their team or themselves?
Sure. And in a few words, why should every HR professional have menopause support at the very top of their to-do list? Of course, there are other issues, and we don't want to demean any other topics as well, but why should menopause be near the top?
I think it essentially demonstrates the commitment of the business to its employees at all stages of life. So therefore, it increases the chances of retention and employee happiness. Of course, I mentioned that statistic that, a third of your population could be above the age of 50, which means there's a chance that they could be going through the menopause. So why not keep that experience in your workplace by demonstrating that you are supporting them at a time when they are most vulnerable?
Thank you. And topics like menopause are quite personal, and we know from talking to people about other topics as well that sometimes addressing these issues can be a bit tricky, sometimes a bit embarrassing. I think we can probably safely say that menopause is not the taboo that it used to be. I think we've seen a huge growth in the conversation around menopause, which is excellent. If there's any areas at all, I think it's involving men in the conversation, not because they don't want to, but just having them in the right place at the right time and having the right conversations. So how do you involve men in this conversation?
So essentially, the bigger picture is creating that environment that encourages employees to feel comfortable sharing without any fear of judgment. And this includes initiatives such as anonymous surveys, having a go-to person for private discussions, that can really open up the conversation. And we've recently started using feedback forms, which has been really refreshing for us to see that in most events, not just menopause, that a third of those attendees are actually managers, who mainly male managers, who have indicated that they have learned a lot from the session. So I guess in some incidences, you may put on a session, but you might not fully see the impact, especially with male employees or managers, unless you do these feedback forms to truly understand if the message is getting across to everyone. And it is, most importantly, implementing multiple avenues to access resources, support, and guidance. That's the main way you're going to change the cultural narrative. So if a male employee would like to find out more about the menopause, but again might feel uncomfortable attending a daisy chain network event or turning up in person to other outreach or awareness, by communicating that you have a specific area within the business that the individual is able to access confidentially and anonymously, will also open up the education around menopause for our male counterparts as well.
My experience as well is, and you may have seen this, Lauren, is that when you put on events and make it clear that they're open to all, then men often will attend. But sometimes if that's not quite explicit in the invitation, they wonder if actually they're imposing if they come to something around menopause. And is this supposed to be a safe place for those going through menopause? Am I actually even supposed to be here? So I think, would you agree that there's something about making sure that the invites are clear on these occasions?
Absolutely, all communication in general. So one of the communications we have sent out had for the Peppy service actually, and we said, this is how it could support you as a manager, and we had all bullet points. This is how it can support you as the employee who's affected, and this is how it can support you if you're not directly affected but may have a partner or a colleague that might be struggling through menopausal symptoms. So this is how you can use Peppy to help support you to support them. So we have absolutely had targeted communications to make it clear that it is inclusive, as well as the events that we've hosted.
And I guess when we're talking about inclusivity as well, it's worth remembering that I guess most of the conversation we're having is around natural menopause. So most people go through menopause in their early 50s, between 45 and 55. But we know, don't we, that some will go through it much sooner. Have you found that younger people with menopause have really appreciated this support as well?
Yes, absolutely. The story earlier on is demonstration to that. We are also organising a panel discussion around intergenerational theme for our D&I week, but it's going to be on World Menopause Day as well. So we will have someone that has experienced menopause as well as someone that hasn't, and just having a conversation around how important it is to know more about the menopause even at an early age, because you might have early onset menopause, and it's important that all the signs and symptoms are highlighted to every single employee, just in case they may need to go and get tested, and how they would go and get tested, and those sort of avenues and referral pathways that the employee can get the help that they need.
And I guess for managers as well, they sort of expect people in their late 40s to perhaps be going through menopause, whereas they may not expect a 30-year-old, for example, to be going through menopause. So it could be for a medical reason, it may be an unknown reason, but it must be quite difficult for managers to put in place support for those young people going through and a sort of either an induced menopause or a menopause of unknown cause. Lauren, I'm going to consider a scenario now. So, just somebody that I'm going to call Jenny, an employee, is experiencing menopause symptoms. She's brought them to your attention. So, feels that they're important enough that they might be affecting her performance. She wants to seek help. She's come to you or to the HR team. What's the first steps that you should take? And I would love to hear our listeners' views on this as well. Do share your thoughts and your ideas. As always, our contact details are in the description of the podcast. But Lauren, to come back to you, somebody's coming to you, they've actually recognised this may be affecting their performance. How would you start that conversation?
I think the first step is to ensure the employee feels supported and shown empathy at the end of the day. We just need to make sure that they know that they've made the right decision to flag this to either myself or HR, because essentially they want the support and they need guidance. From there, they would be advised to meet with occupational health, where they are best placed to advise not only the employee, but also the manager, if necessary, not always necessary, but if necessary, on things like reasonable adjustments. And HR would also be aware of the other services and support. So at BNP Paribas, we actually have created a menopause support page on our intranet that anyone can access. And it has resources, event recordings, how to book appointments or speak to an expert. And it also has a list of our menopause champions who can be contacted at any time. And we also have a manager support area there as well. So any communications, any events we do, we always pinpoint back to this menopause support page. And we also work very closely with HRBPs to ensure that they are aware of any updates or how to access should anyone approach a HRBP with any concerns. And then I guess with the initial guidance on reasonable adjustments and the awareness of the support and resources, as well as how to access this information, because that's the key thing. You could have all the services under the sun, but unless the employee knows where to access that information, it is redundant. So you need to make sure, again, with your communication, with your awareness, you're signposting to the most appropriate area. But we would hope that this could provide confidence in the employee to seek the help that they need and have a plan to move forwards and hopefully get them back on track and performing where they want to be.
And in order to do that, it's really important that the manager or whoever they've raised this with, their first reaction is really important, isn't it? The way that they deal with this issue, whether they point them in the right direction, whether they just fob them off. I think that's really important. And I think I'm right in saying that you have managers training and awareness sessions so that it's not just the people who are going through menopause who know how to access the support, but also the managers who actually may never go through menopause and perhaps wouldn't go to those sites themselves, but they also need to know how to access it, don't they?
Absolutely. And we've had this common theme as, are you going to introduce mandatory training? And whilst mandatory training has a certain place in the world of corporate wellbeing, we also need to be aware that it's not just the mandatory training, it's the constant updating of those training methods, of what's available and the signposting. Because as I mentioned, someone might go through training and might not necessarily have the opportunity to put it into practice because at the moment they haven't got anyone in their team. And then all of a sudden, 6 months down the line, they have an employee and they may have forgotten most of their training. So just ensuring that you've got that backup, that the manager or the employee or the colleague are able to just tap in and remember what's available and how to access that support. That's what's key. It's not just having the initial training, it's what you are doing afterwards to keep that drum banging.
I like that phrase, keep the drum banging. And also what you've highlighted is the importance of not just looking at the individuals who need support in the workplace, but actually looking at the whole culture of the organisation so that the conversation becomes easy, it becomes every day, and the managers themselves know where to get the support they need to help their colleagues. I think that's really important. The conversation today, Lauren, has been great. You've emphasised for us the importance of supporting those going through the menopause, but also the importance of engaging with everybody within a company so that everybody knows the pathway of support that's on offer. Everyone knows where they can turn and where reasonable adjustments, if necessary, are needed and how they can be accessed. You've talked to us about the symptoms and you gave us some good figures, reminding us that 8 out of 10 people who are going through menopause will be working alongside it. And it would be foolish, really, to think that their menopause symptoms are not affecting them at work. Anything that helps, anything that affects our health outside of work is going to have an impact at work as well, including our menopause symptoms. And we touched on the symptoms, the things which in surveys particularly show to be difficult at work, things like the brain fog, the concentration, the memory issues, and the importance of things like reminders and sticky notes and all those kinds of things, which are really helpful. Your expertise, particularly around strategies and policies, has been really useful. We've talked about how policies are really essential, but actually the flexibility is really important as well to work within those policies. And I think that's a good lesson to listen to as well. You've talked about the dialogue, the conversation, banging the drum is a phrase you use. I love that. Just keep going with the messaging. That's really important. But also recognising that when you take steps like you have done at BNP Paribas, it benefits everyone, doesn't it? And we talked about the fans where, okay, maybe the menopausal woman is the most obvious one to need a hot flush, but there are other people as well who suffer from temperature irregularities and other medical conditions. And so the easy access to fans is really useful for them as well. And you've helped us to think about some first steps that people can do, and you've given us some great stories as well. I just wonder, Lauren, if there's anything else that you'd like to share, or any top tips or anything that you'd like to add?
I guess for me, the reason why, don't get me wrong, we've still got far to go, but we're doing well at BNP Paribas. But the reason why we have been so successful to date for all of the changes and conversations in our workplace is because we spoke to the employees that have or are currently going through the menopause and asked them. We asked them, what do we need to do to best support you? What haven't we got in place that we need to look at? And it's important that you speak to that group of people in your workplace because they're the ones that are experiencing it. They would feel valued, and listened, if you're able to sit them down, have the conversation, take on board what they've said, and have been able to action it, that's what's important. And that's the best place to start if you haven't already.
And that's a great place to finish today as well. Lauren, thank you so much for your honest insights and your commitment in your own workplace. And thank you to those of you who are listening. Your time is much appreciated. Thank you for joining me today on Pep Talks, Health Matters at Work. If you're like me and you love talking about all things health and work, then hit the subscribe button, leave a review and spread the word. Your feedback will drive our content. And if there's something you'd really like me to cover, then just let me know. We would be pleased to do so. Join us next time for some more real talk, because health truly matters at work. And next time I'll be joined by Jen West and Suzanne Adams, and we're going to be talking about how to approach the painful discussion around baby loss at work, a very personal but very painful issue. And we'll be talking about that next time. But until then, let's continue making health matter at work. Thank you.